All right. Well, hello, everybody. Welcome to the 29th of July, right? Crazy, wild, and crazy stuff. Many of you guys know, but we've been doing a lot of travel in the last 8 weeks. We've been hitting the road like crazy, just trying to get out there, be in front of people. Last weekend, I got to go to Reno, Nevada, and go to the Sky High Basehead Barbecue, which was not a normal event for us, but with some of the new products that we have coming out that have that special sauce, as Matthew would say, it's good to get out and get in front of people and start talking about some of these new products that we have coming up. Really unique, and certainly, though we've always put an emphasis in the higher end sound quality and sound quality, lots of power, lots of special sauce, lots of juice, whatever you want to call it at AudioControl. We're certainly looking at trying to be a little bit more diversified across the board with our special sauce. So I think today's topic is awesome and excellent, and I'm sure Matthew has some great stuff planned. So with that, I'll turn it over to Mr. Matthew.
I'm muted. There we go. Thank you, Chris. Yeah, so today we are talking about the special sauce. What is that? What are we talking about? It's a catchy little title that I've added on there, but what does that really have to do anything, or what does that mean? To me, it means a couple of different things. I mean, it's just kind of a funny term, obviously, Chris and I use sometimes, but what it kind of really means to me is like, when you just need that extra little something, when there's a challenge that you can't overcome with the traditional car audio methods, or there's those situations where there isn't a good answer, that's where the special sauce comes in. That's where AudioControl comes in a lot of those situations. Things like you can't replace the head unit. Traditionally years ago, okay, you put in an LOC or something like that, and you can make it work. But as somebody that was a retailer for years and talked to customers about line output converters, our usual kind of sales pitch was like, well, yeah, we can still do the system and keep your factory head unit, but you're only going to get 70% of the performance that you could have got if you would have bought a head unit. These days, that's just not true. Nowadays, we can get just as good, if not sometimes better performance out of a factory head unit than we can out of an aftermarket. So little things like that, poor performance from existing systems. This is one that I used to deal with as a retailer a lot. You get customers that come in, and whether they purchased the system from you or whether they had it done at a different shop, or maybe they bought the car and it was already in there, whatever the case may be, they don't always want to replace everything or start all over, and that's where sometimes sprinkling on that little bit of special sauce comes into play, or maybe they are happy with it, but they're just looking for that little bit of extra. Again, as a retailer, we would often get customers that came in that were super satisfied with their system, like loved the install, loved the way it sounded, super happy with everything, but maybe they got their tax return and were looking to blow a little bit of money, or just wanted to treat themselves to a new toy, or whatever the case may be. And there was always kind of that question of like, well, without just buying, or I should say, without replacing something that I already have, how can I make my system sound better? Is there something we can add that's just going to give me that little extra? And that's where the stuff that we're going to talk about today really kind of comes into play. Is we have things that, even if they have a aftermarket radio, an aftermarket 5-channel or 4-channel in mono, or whatever their system is, if they're like mostly happy with it but just want a little bit more, we have products that we can add to those systems and make them sound even better. Today we are specifically not talking about traditional DSPs, because DSPs kind of need their own hour of time, and there's a whole lot that we can go down the rabbit hole with that. And I think that that's kind of that's like the obvious answer is, if you said, hey, what can I add to almost any system and make it sound better? Most guys' answer is going to be a DSP. And that's a easy answer. It's an obvious answer. And it's true. I mean, of course, we could add a DM608. We could add a DM810. We could make just about any system sound better. But that's not what we're talking about today. I wanted to go the not so traveled route.
The other thing that I find about every one of the products is that AudioControl is very unique in that we don't really pay much attention to what else product wise is out there. And I think that's where a lot of the special sauce comes from, is that, we hear from the marketplace, we're engaged. Matthew and I take, a half a dozen tech calls every day for a 2021 vehicle, or, at 6 o'clock in the morning, we're answering text messages about this vehicle issue or this product issue, or, this doesn't sound good. Why? And so when we work with the engineers on all the new products, we don't really have a product in the marketplace that is sufficing or doing a great job, if they are doing it at all. So I don't know of anything that we've done that we've kind of reverse engineered and kind of tried to do it. It's like, okay, there's this problem in the marketplace. We're going to try to do what we can, whether it's come up with Accubase, whether it's come up with the level matching circuit, whether it's the Epicenter from 37 years ago, or the level mixers on the amplifiers. And it's kind of unique with it. There's even the LMC, the load matching circuits, that was a couple of years back and forth going, an engineer saying, no, you can't do that, you can't do that, and working towards finding a solution to get to where we're at. And that's really where the special sauce comes from. If you look back historically, AudioControl is the first one to make an electronic crossover. How crazy is that? Talk about special sauce. Before amplifiers had crossovers on them or anything like that, and before people were doing DSP with active systems, so I think that's really where the special sauce has come from AudioControl for the last 35 years or so.
Agreed, especially when you start looking at like some of those really unique pieces that were just way ahead of their time. Some of the what was it, like DQT and DQX and DQL and some of those pieces with digital displays and basically digital DSPs, with digital displays up front and all that sort of thing that were just way ahead of their time. I mean, talk about some interesting special sauce that was just probably brought out too early, if anything. So to continue with that overall kind of theme, there's a lot of little not issues, but things that can pop up when designing systems, selling systems, but especially I feel like upgrading existing setups or helping customers that have already come in. If you're a retailer joining us today and watching this, like if that customer already came to you and already spent, whatever, whether it was $2,000 or $8,000 or whatever it was, maybe it's $500, whatever it is that they spent, they've already been a customer. They've already put their, trust in you and purchase things from you and this and that. So how do you, kind of have that next upgrade path? How do you have that step forward? And I think that that's something that's important to kind of have in your back pocket, is even though you may know that they're not probably going to buy that today, it's nice to know that if they are happy with everything and they do come back in 6 months or a year or whatever, that you at least have something to offer them to keep going. And I think that's definitely an important thing to keep in the back of your mind. And some of those things too, that some of the products today we're talking about can help kind of solve for you, are things like low line level voltage, low output, low volume, just a lot of those pesky little issues where if there's already an aftermarket head unit, there's already an aftermarket amplifier, there's already aftermarket speakers. What are you going to do to fix that? There's really no good fix if that stuff's already installed, right? There's no way. You're not going to tune it to get more volume. If it's already properly tuned and gains are already set correctly and everything's already dialed in, what are you going to do to get more output out of that thing, right? Turning up the gains isn't going to make it better. You're just going to introduce distortion and cause problems. So that's where things like this come into play. With that, I think we'll kind of dig into it and start getting into some products. So one of the things that I wanted to talk about today a little bit was the DQ61. The DQ61 is basically a favorite of mine. When I travel around, if I've ever come to your area and done a training or stopped into your store or anything like that, you've probably heard me talk about the DQ61 before. It's such a cool piece. I think it's a unique product, and it's something that kind of gets overlooked in the marketplace. And I actually kind of feel that way about just about everything we're going to talk about today, is these are things that kind of get glossed over. People browse right past them in the catalog. DSPs are hot, so everybody looks at DSP amplifiers and standalone DSPs and that sort of thing. But what about the guy who isn't ready for that? What about the customer that can't spend the money for a DSP? What about the shop that isn't confident in working with software? Regardless of our software being simple and DM Smart DSP software being easy to run and the app being simple and all that stuff, there are still going to be shops that are just not ready, or their tech is, you know, old school or whatever you want to say, and doesn't want to deal with it. Or like I said, maybe the budget doesn't allow it. So we need to have something between a, you know, LC7i and a DM608. There needs to be something in the middle. And that's something that as an industry, we don't really have a lot that's between those points, between a high quality LOC and a full-blown DSP with software. There's really not a lot available. And so that's where something like the DQ61 comes into play. Like I said, super, super cool piece. I've got the top kind of removed from this one, so hopefully I don't drop it. But this is essentially a 6-channel input, 6-channel output, high to low converter. Okay, so it is going to take the place of, say, your LC7i if you've already got one installed or something like that. But it does so much more than, say, an LC7i could do. So think about it as you have the features of something like a LC7i, but you also have things like EQ. We also have things like time correction. We also have independent input and output levels. We have summing. We have basically a line driver built in. We've got a little bit of everything kind of sprinkled in there. So the way that I talk about the DQ61 is almost like it's a, you know, DSP light, or it's a you know, a DSP with analog controls is the way I kind of look at it. Because really, I mean, this is going to do, you know, I would say maybe 70 or 80% of what a DSP can do just with physical dials and knobs and controls. So when you're looking at the piece itself, it's pretty straightforward. I mean, you've got a separate front EQ, separate rear EQ, and separate sub EQ. And not only that, we do have Accubase built in on the DQ61 as well, which is great. So again, if you are somebody that's familiar with, say, the LC7i, you've been installing them, or you're a consumer watching this and you have one in your car or whatever, maybe you're looking for an upgrade, but you're not quite comfortable with doing something with software or don't have the budget for it, swapping from an LC7i to a DQ61 is like a 2-minute job. The connectors are literally the same. The controller, you know, the cable that goes from the dash to this piece, if you have an ACR in your vehicle, the cable is the same. It would literally be a 5-minute job to swap out an LC7i for a DQ61.
There's Adam asked, you know, no need for like a other DSP, a DSR1 or insert blank, whatever. If you use a DQ61 on a newer model vehicle with integrated amps, need LC products or anything ahead of it. So like Matthew was saying, it's kind of just a DSP light. So it doesn't do any kind of input correction or anything like that, but you do have, you know, a limited amount of bands that you can go through and EQ and play with stuff. So it falls in between, you know, an active line output converter. It adds EQ. The nice thing with the DQ61 is it does have input and output level controls. So you can kind of mix the, you know, you have a little bit more mixing ability on input versus output when you're in a sum. So there is some cool stuff there. And I'm sure he'll talk about the time alignment. So it depends on the system. Most systems, I would say, no, you need nothing on the front side of this. It was built, you know, to originally be, you know, that line output converter with some special sauce, right? So it's really unique, and so no need for anything else. You can go from a premium sound system right into the DQ61. You get your RCAs out, front, rear, sub, and then you have the ability to go through and really do some tuning. I'd put it, you can certainly do a bunch of tuning with it, but you can't do any fine tuning with it.
That's a good way to put that. I feel like that's a pretty reasonable way to put that. And to kind of further answer that side of it, like, does anything need to go before a DQ61? Like Chris said, it really doesn't. To that point, one of the things that really makes this product and pretty much all of our products pretty special is that on the high level input side, on the speaker level input, these will accept up to 40 volts of high level input. So even if you are working on a car with premium sound and it's a factory amplified system, you can still bring in an amplified front, rear, and sub signal, or a high and low and a rear signal or whatever it is that you need to bring in, do some summing inside of this and be able to have a reasonably clean signal coming out of the RCAs that's very usable to build your system off of. One of the complaints, not even really a complaint, but some of the calls that we get about the LC7i is that when people are using it to do signal summing, they have no way to really control how much of each signal gets summed together. So if you're bringing in a real hot high frequency channel and a not so hot low frequency channel, and you sum those together in an LC7i, you're basically just getting the sum of those channels mashed together, right? So you really don't have any way to dumb down that high frequency channel before it goes into that LC7i, or on the output side for that matter, because it's already been summed together. On a DQ61, you would be able to take that, say, high frequency channel, and using your input level controls here on the left side of the product, we could actually bring that channel and bring it down a little bit and try to kind of normalize it. Same thing if it's the channel that has maybe your chimes or something like that, and you still need to grab the audio from that channel because it's maybe the front speakers or center channel or whatever it is. Maybe you need to grab the audio from there, but you want to kind of bring it down a little just so that you don't have the chimes blaring. You could use that input level to kind of dumb that down a little bit and not totally mute those chimes, but at least bring them down to a more reasonable level, but still get the audio information from that channel enough to produce a reasonable signal on the output side. So one of the things Chris brought up too was the EQ section. It is a 7-band EQ for the front, 7-band for the rear, 7-band for the sub. Of course, there are different frequencies for the sub channel than there are for the front and rear. So you've got a little bit more customization there. And then, like I said, the Accubase that's built in is really pretty cool. This one does have an LED for Accubase as well. So it shows when the Accubase is engaged, kind of like our LC2i Pro, if you want to think of it that way. So really easy to set up Accubase. It's right on top of the product. It's not on the sides or inside with jumpers or anything like that. It is just level and threshold. For those of you not super familiar with Accubase, Accubase is designed to compensate for bass roll off. So if you've got one of those systems where the factory radio, kills the bass or it doesn't allow the bass to get any louder past a certain volume point. Maybe the radio goes from 0 to 60 on the volume scale, but at 45, the bass doesn't get any louder. Accubase can help fill in from 45 to 60 in that example. So that's just a quick brief overview of how Accubase works. The little knob above Accubase is signal delay, and it's one of the coolest signal delays out there, I think, for something simple. Like, let's be honest, I feel like most shops that I run into that are doing regular daily installs, not show cars, not super high-end stuff, just your average stereo shop, the ones that I travel to and talk to anyway, when I talk to them about time correction, I would say a vast majority of them are not doing any time alignment, any time correction, any of it. They're just putting systems out the door in stereo because they feel like it's too much work. They don't want to do the measurements. They don't want to do the math. They don't want to do whatever that is, or they've tried it in the past and it sounded goofy, or it didn't sound right, or, they messed up the measurements or whatever it was. Like, they, a lot of times, just don't like the way that it turned out. So with the DQ61, the time correction is different from pretty much any time correction you've ever used before. It's unique and it works really well. So what you're going to do is you're going to play a song that has like I use a track that has like some strong female vocals. Doesn't have to be a cappella or anything, but something where there's not a lot of other instruments and things going on is what I like to use. And then on top of the DQ61, there's a little dial that says normal and setup. So if you flip that dial to setup, the little LED next to setup is going to light up. And now your ACR3, which is your bass knob essentially that's up at the dash, is going to become your controller for the time correction. So while you're listening to this song and this artist is singing to you, she's essentially, he or she is going to essentially sound like they're singing to you from the left front speaker. And as you turn the knob, each indentation or each click of that knob is going to essentially move the artist's voice from this left channel. And with every click of that knob, you're going to hear the voice move to kind of the center of the soundstage. Now, once the artist is in the middle of the soundstage, you can stop touching the knob, click it one time, because the ACR3 does click straight in, click it one time, and now we're doing the subwoofer. So now we want to switch to a song that has some strong bass, maybe some hip hop, maybe some EDM, whatever it is, something with a good bass line. And now when you turn that knob, what you're going to hear is you're going to hear the woofer move from probably the trunk or the hatch area. And with every click of that ACR3, you're going to hear the woofer move from the back of the vehicle towards the center console or the middle of the vehicle. If it's properly set up, you should hear essentially the woofer sound like it's coming from the front. So you have some nice tight up front bass, and your artist singing is going to sound like they're from the middle of the windshield or the middle of the dashboard, something like that. Now, when you're done doing that, you're happy with where it's at. All you've got to do is go back to the DQ61 and flip this little knob back to normal. And now the time correction is locked in. Playing with the ACR knob in the dash is not going to mess up the time correction. You cannot accidentally reset it or anything like that. The only way to set up the time correction is by flipping that little knob here. So there's no chance of it accidentally getting messed with. One of my favorite things from like a retailer's point of view is I have had a product like this in my own car. And the way that I used to sell it was it has a really handy feature built in that ACR3 dash knob, the base knob, let's call it. That level controller, like I mentioned, not only turns, but it clicks as well. Well, when you click that knob, it disengages the time correction instantly. There's no delay, right? So it disengages your time correction. It doesn't take 2 seconds to do it. It's like right away. So what I would do is I would disengage the time correction, put a customer in the driver's seat of my car, and play a song that they're familiar with, depending on their, age group, whatever. Play a song that they like, something that they're familiar with. And playing it in stereo on a nice system, they're like, wow, this sounds really good. Your car sounds great, whatever. And then as soon as you click that knob, as soon as you click that ACR3, and the imaging goes from the speakers sounding like they're, here and here, to all of a sudden it goes right to the middle of the soundstage. It's such a cool demo. And I can't tell you how many DQ61s and Dqdxs I sold just based off of that quick demo. It takes 30 seconds to do it. And they always swear that you turn on a center channel. Like, that's how convincing it is. Now, is this time correction the same thing as a DM608 or a DM810 or a D series amplifier? Absolutely not. It is a much simpler version of time correction. Essentially what we're doing is delaying the left speaker to the right speaker. That's it, right? We're not really doing, delays for every channel or anything like that. It's a very simple correction, but like I said, it actually works surprisingly well. If you've never tried it, give it a shot. It takes 2 seconds to set up, and it's a pretty convincing feature.
Mr. Special Sauce Todd Ramsey wrote, if you wanted to use this in a basic, say, Toyota upgrade to a 5-channel amplifier, front components, rear coax, and a sub with an OEM head unit that has all pass filters, just use it without any time correction. It'll sound great in both seats. EQ, Accubase, line drive, and amplify the input. Great solution. That's exactly the perfect kind of scenario where you have a base model radio, customers coming in for a 5-channel. Obviously if they have a base model car and they're coming in and doing a 5-channel, a 249, 299 set of components where they're using the passive crossover, this is, that customer is not going to want a DSP.
Right.
This is the product that they would want, just like Todd's saying, to get in there, have a little bit of ability to manipulate time, equalization for those new components they're getting. Perfect. And you're talking about a few $100 installed versus $1,000 installed versus by the time you tune a DSP
for like
and everything else,
$300. They're not crazy expensive. So
and if you're even for you even a seasoned installer, I mean, with 7 bands, I mean, you're not going to have to spend 45 minutes tuning a DQ61. You know what I mean?
No, it's still going to be a 5-minute tune.
Yeah, you could use an SA4100, get in there, throw some peak noise in, and have that thing tuned in 10 minutes.
Absolutely. I actually rode in a rep's car in Virginia a couple of years ago who had like a pretty much exactly what Todd's talking about. It was like a Toyota Corolla. It was like his wife's car. It was just a little runaround car, nothing crazy, but it had the factory radio. And for security reasons, just for theft reasons, they didn't want to replace that radio. It was an easily replaceable deck. I mean, it was a $10 dash kit replacement. It was no big deal, but they didn't want to because of where she worked and where she had to park the car, or it sat at the park and ride, or whatever the reason was. And so they're like, yeah, let's just use a DQ61 instead. And again, you take a 20-year-old Corolla factory radio, and now you make that car sound like it has a $1,200 modern double din in it. It's a pretty impressive setup. And one of the things that was always stuck out to me too is like, one of the biggest problems with just putting in, say, a LC2i or an LC7i or something like that. They're great products and they're going to give you clean signal, but it's going to be the exact same signal that we took out of that factory radio, right? So if that factory radio only has bass and treble, which the majority of them do, that's not going to give you a lot to do with it. Like, you can't really tune a system when all you have is bass and treble on a factory radio. I mean, if you're lucky, maybe you get bass mid treble or something like that. But even in a lot of brand new cars, my wife has a almost brand new Honda. It has bass mid treble. That's it. It does not have like a full EQ. This would be a perfect solution for a car like that. So very cool piece. Before we move on to anything else, there are a couple of jumpers inside. I did want to just quickly kind of talk about kind of how those work and what those are set up for. So inside the piece itself, you've got a couple of little jumpers here, and they're going to be kind of hard for you to see, but you can always check out the owner's manual if you want to dive deeper into these. But there is a ground isolation jumper in here. If you are getting any sort of noise issues or anything like that, you'll see there's a setting for ground isolation, ground combined, or ground through some impedance load. There's also GTO that you can engage or disengage. So remember, if you are using this with some sort of real turn on circuit, you're going to want to disengage GTO so that it doesn't use auto turn on and accidentally turn itself on when you don't want it to. So you've got a couple of things there. We also have the summing jumpers and the what they call connected to main jumpers. So this is one of those products where you can feed in, just 2 channels of audio and still get 6 channels out. So if you have a situation where you're working on one of these newer cars and the only thing you can really find in that car is like maybe the rear speakers are full range and they're stereo and they're usable. Sometimes if the budget only allows for you to use those and the guy's okay with losing fader, you could feed in just those 2 channels of audio into a DQ61, get 6 channels of audio out to feed into their new 5-channel amp, and still have some ability to at least do a little bit of tuning on that vehicle. Like Chris mentioned, it's not going to be super fine tuning. It's not a 31 band EQ with a DSP or any of that stuff, but it at least gives you a whole lot more than putting in just a regular LOC, a ton more than putting in a basic passive LOC. So lots of cool stuff in a DQ61. Anything else on that, Chris, before we move on?
I'm good. I think we got it covered.
Awesome. So let's chat about the Dqdx. So the Dqdx is a similar product. This is, as you'll see, pretty similar in size and style and look to the DQ61. In fact, they're kind of, I don't want to say the same. Let's call them cousins, maybe. The Dqdx is kind of the aftermarket version of the DQ61. So Dqdx is RCA in, RCA out, rather than high level in, low level out on the DQ61. That's the first thing just about anybody notices on a DQDX is, oh, it's RCA in, RCA out. So this is even more so kind of your, you want to call it a budget DSP or a basic DSP or DSP light or something like that. Again, this is that exact scenario. So there's a bunch of reasons why you might add this to a system. I mentioned earlier, sometimes you have that customer that already has existing gear. If you bring in a car that already has a single DIN, double DIN, whatever radio in it, they've already got a 5-channel amp from you, they've already got all these things, but they're still looking for that little bit of extra, sprinkle on the Dqdx special sauce, and I promise you that system will sound better. Like, no doubt about it. You will have a better sounding result when you're done, because of a few main things. One, you're upping your line voltage. So the Dqdx is going to provide a higher line output voltage and basically act as, essentially like a line driver. Okay. So you're going to have a hotter signal coming out of your Dqdx. We've also got a separate front, rear, and sub EQ, just like the DQ61. We still have that nice time delay or time correction, whatever you want to call it, on this piece, and it works exactly the same. So it's that same ACR, it's the same setup of just twisting a knob, using the dash controller to dial in the time correction, and then, twisting this knob back to normal, and you're done. Like I said, it does that same click it in to disengage the time correction. It's almost like they built it for demoing to customers, What it's really kind of for is switching from like single seat to 2-seat. So what I used to do in my car when I had a DQDX was when I got in, I would have it, set up as a single seat car. But occasionally, if my wife was with me in the passenger seat, she would complain that it sounded kind of goofy, and time correction can sometimes do that. Like, like it doesn't always sound great for the passenger. So when she was in the car, I would just simply click the knob, and in 2 seconds, or half a second for that matter, it switched back to stereo, and it sounds great for both of us. So it's a really cool way to do that. It's an easy feature to have in there. And of course, when that ACR is plugged into this, I didn't mention this earlier, on the Dqdx and the DQ61, when there is a ACR knob plugged into these, it is going to provide sub control under just normal driving circumstances. So when you're not using the ACR to set up the time correction initially, under just normal everyday circumstances, it's going to be your sub level control. So that's one of those things where this can add features that you may not have. You know, if your customer came in and they bought a cheap $80 radio from wherever, the internet, Walmart, Best Buy, whatever, they just bought an inexpensive radio and they brought it to you to put in, and you know, maybe you tried to tell them about a double din or this, that, and the other, and they insisted. Okay, great. So you put it in anyway, and now they want to build the system. Now they want to add a 4-channel and a mono and do this, that, and the other. And sometimes you got to go to that customer and say, hey, look, you know, your deck only has one set of RCA pre-outs. They're 1 volt pre-outs. You don't have a whole lot here to build the system off of. This is the ultimate piece to add for that customer, because now we've taken that $60, $80 single din and given it the outputs of a much higher end unit. Now they have 6 channels of RCA out. Now they have a sub control. If they didn't have that already, now they do. Maybe they're bringing you a sub amp that doesn't have a bass knob. Maybe you can't get a bass knob for it, or whatever the case may be. You know, this is now going to give them the option to have that. So there's some very, very cool features in here that really make this a good candidate. And it's, again, it's one of those pieces where if you're a retailer, having one of these on the shelf makes all the difference in the world. This is an easy add-on piece when you're already selling a system, or when that customer's coming in and they're just having you, whatever, check out something else, something unrelated, and you kind of look in there and go, hey, they've already got a full system in here. There's no opportunity. There is still an opportunity. Adding something like this is going to obviously, you know, get you a sale, but it's also going to end up with them having a much better sounding system at the end of the day. So they're a happier customer. You know, you showed them something that can make their system sound better. And hey, even if they don't get it from you today, at least you planted the seed that next time they've got a few extra bucks to spend, you have something in stock that could make that system sound better.
I'm gonna answer a couple of questions here. So what's up, Chico Boss? So Chico Boss just got a DM608 this week, and he asked if there was any advice about it. Right away, hang out with us today. We might get to a little bit talking about that stuff, but more so, you can go back on our YouTube channel and just do a search for DM608 or DM tuning or something like that. We have several videos where we can go through and talk a little bit more about that, but also Dean and Fernando at 5 Star Car Audio have done a little bit of quick and easy kind of reviews. So you can go to the 5 Star Car Audio YouTube page and just search for DM608, and there'll be lots of good advice and clues on
they've done
some of these previously recorded videos.
Yeah.
I wanted to talk real quick, Matthew, let's talk about CarPlay real quick and some special sauce. You know, CarPlay is CarPlay, but currently it's hard to get an A branded CarPlay source unit. And if you compare what you might have available in stock at some retail stores today versus, you know, 2 years ago, you probably don't have the same caliber available today with all the product shortages. So the Dqdx is awesome for that kind of stuff. If you have a customer or you personally have like an Android tablet style radio or something like that, one of the reasons that, you know, when you get a factory replacement, say you have an Android style tablet in your OE car, and if it goes bad, you're talking about, you know, $3,000, $4,000, $5,000, $6,000 to get it replaced. But you can go buy an aftermarket one that is not, you know, a name brand one or something like that. How do they make it so cheap? Well, they make it so cheap because the outputs are going to be really anemic and lower quality and stuff like that. So the Dqdx is really perfect for today and what's going on in the marketplace.
Absolutely.
Particularly if you've bought a CarPlay unit in the last 6 months, chances are you've had a hard time finding that, you know, that A brand, right? So maybe you've bought the B or C style brand. Well, there is a huge audio output difference if you know, are using a top brand product versus a lower brand product. And the Dqdx would be like, okay, well, yes, you need CarPlay today. This is what I have available. I know that the outputs are not as good as they possibly could be, but this Dqdx is going to make sure that you have better than what you would have had with a, you know, a top tier brand A unit today. So I mean, that's a great scenario. I think more than ever, audio control has become more and more important because of our focus on the trunk forward, you know, product and the special sauce that it holds. So the Dqdx could be potentially more important today with some of these, you know, brand B or brand C style CarPlay head units. I would be selling a bunch of DQDXs if I was in retail today and doing a, you know, a second tier CarPlay head unit for sure.
Absolutely, because I mean, let's face it. When you're looking at those as a customer too, what do most customers that want to replace their head unit in the first place? Like, why are they replacing it? Chances are they're replacing it to get CarPlay or Android Auto. Like, those are the two number one things customers are coming in and asking for, or maybe a backup camera. But generally, it's going to be CarPlay, Android Auto stuff, right? So to them, the difference between a, you know, brand A CarPlay radio and brand B CarPlay radio is minimal. They don't know the difference, that one is going to sound better than the other. You know, they may judge by the price that one of them is going to be a higher quality than the other, but let's face it, CarPlay is built into your iPhone. It's not built into the radio. You just need a radio that can show it to you. So really, CarPlay is CarPlay for the most part. So if you're used to selling, say, $600 to $1,000 CarPlay radios, and Android Auto radios are kind of your bread and butter, but now all of a sudden you're forced down to these, you know, say $200 to $500 CarPlay and Android radios. How are you making that up, right? I mean, you could sell that to the customer and say, hey, come back in a year and buy something better, but they're not going to be happy with that idea. Like, who wants to buy something for now? Nobody wants to buy something for now. They want a permanent solution. And so why not do exactly what Chris mentioned and offer, you know, hey, with this piece combined, we can make this system sound just like it would have if you were able to get, you know, such and such a radio. And you as a retailer, if you're looking at this, now you've got that sale back up to where you'd like it to be as well. And, you know, at the end of the day, they're getting a high quality piece. The good news there too, in the long run, is let's say they do go that route. They get that $200 CarPlay deck, they get a Dqdx, and let's say a year from now, they come back and they're like, you know what, man, I hate this thing. The CarPlay is fine, but the rest of the interface is garbage, or whatever the case may be, whatever they don't like about it. Even if they do come in and you have better radios in stock at the time, and you do get them into a $1,500 floating screen, massive screen radio, that's fine. Leave the Dqdx in there. You can still run front, rear, and sub in and front, rear, and sub out, and just run it as like a line driver / EQ. Like, there's no reason to take it back out, is what I'm getting at. So regardless of what they put in today and they put in a year or two, it's still going to be a viable piece to keep in that system. And the time correction and everything else that's in it is still going to be super useful and a good thing to have in that system regardless. So with the Dqdx, one of the differences, though, I should mention before we move on to other products, is this does not have Accubase. Why does it not have Accubase? Because we don't need Accubase when there is, generally speaking anyway, when there is low level in, low level out. Generally speaking, Accubase is used with factory systems that have base roll-off. So when the Dqdx is designed for mostly aftermarket setups, you know, there's really no reason to have it in there. So instead, what they gave you is a crossover frequency. So the nice thing about the crossover section on this is it's a pretty slick crossover setup. It is not just crossing over the sub output. It is crossing over the sub output, but it's also crossing over the front and rear outputs. So for example, if we take this little dial on the top here and we dial this in at, say, 90 Hertz, what this is going to do is send 90 Hertz and below to the channel 3 or subwoofer outputs, and everything 90 Hertz and above is going to go to my front and rear outputs. So again, if you have an amplifier that doesn't have a great crossover section, or maybe it has a variable crossover, but it's only marked at 20 and 300, and you don't know where 90 is in between those two, maybe you don't have the RTA and stuff to find out, okay, fine. This you could set at 90 and know that it's set at 90. You're not guessing, right? Also, the crossover section in this, generally speaking, is going to be nicer than what's built into a lot of amplifiers out there. So this is a 24 dB per octave Linkwitz-Riley crossover that's built in. So it's a nice crossover section that's in there, and it's just one of those added little benefits that's built in. So Dqdx, very, very cool piece. It's a simple piece to add on, and like I said, kind of the cousin to the DQ61. So let's move on here, and moving on to one of my favorite pieces in recent times, the Matrix Plus. So the Matrix Plus has been around for a while. This is a line driver. This is a 6-channel in, 6-channel out line driver. The cool thing about the Matrix right now is that this has been updated within the last year. It has gotten considerably smaller. It's about 30% smaller than it used to be. This has the same SKU, it's the same price, the features are really the same as it's always been, but we did conformally coat the PC board now. So we had so many retailers and dealers telling us, hey man, we put a Matrix on every boat we do. Because we do big boats and the RCA runs are really long sometimes, or we just need something to drive that signal up and give us a hotter signal. A lot of these marine radios don't have a real hot RCA output. Or maybe they have multiple amplifiers that are running zones of speakers and they need to bring in, 2 channels of RCA in, but get 6 channels of RCA out. And they don't want to use Y adapters and split their signal over and over again. That's a cheesy way to do it anyway. The Matrix is a perfect answer for those scenarios. Basically what this is, like I said, it's a line driver, but it is a 6-channel unit. So again, we're talking about the special sauce today and what we can sprinkle onto a system to make good sound great, right? Like that's what we're all about. So if you take a existing aftermarket setup, again, we talked about adding the Dqdx or something like that. If you have a customer who maybe they have a really nice doubled in, they've got a really high-end, nice doubled in or floating screen radio, they've got nice amplifiers, they've got nice speakers, there's no need maybe for a Dqdx in their system. Maybe their deck has a 31 band EQ. A Dqdx is not probably going to add anything to that setup. However, a Matrix could add something to that setup. I have this exact scenario. I have a nice floating screen, fairly high-end big screen radio in my car, and I have all audio control amplifiers. I've got nice speakers. I've got a nice sub, all this stuff, and it sounded good, but I could use just a little bit extra. Like I wanted just a little bit more. Although I tend to lean towards SQ versus SPL in my personal preferences. I guess maybe I'm an SQL guy because I do like stuff to play at like a concert level volume, but I still want it to sound super clean. And that's really where this Matrix came in. Like this has gotten so small now, you can see it in my hand. I mean, it's tiny. This is an iPhone 12 mini, the little tiny iPhone. And like, look how small this thing is comparatively speaking. It's tiny. So what's nice about its new size? It
was funny because this weekend at the Basehead barbecue, I went and grabbed one of these, and I was thinking, what's the one product that these 50 demo cars out here that are just, what's the one product that would really make a difference? So I went and grabbed one of these, and I opened it up and I took it out of the box, and as soon as I grabbed it, I just went, oh, because I'm used to the old school Matrix, and that 30% difference is huge.
It's so small. It's tiny. This thing's little. Like it's in one hand. I mean, the old one was like, I don't know, probably closer to like this size if you were, looking at them. It was probably pretty close to that. So I mean, it's a dramatic difference. But yeah, so like in my system, all I did was put this inside the dashboard. I went, 6-inch RCAs out of the back of my deck right into the Matrix, and then the RCAs I already had running to the amps, I just plugged into the other side of the Matrix and upped my line voltage to like 9 volts. So even though I have a high-end radio in my dash that's giving me 4 or 5 volts, unclipped, good clean signal, it's still only 4 or 5 volts, and my amplifiers will take in close to 10. So if I can feed them a solid 8, 9, 10 volts of input, I can take all the gains on everything and put them almost all the way down, retune that system, and let me tell you, I got so much more volume, better clarity, more dynamic. It's just a better sounding system. Like I was blown away at how big of a difference it made. Like I travel around and train and preach about what a difference it makes, but putting it in your own vehicle and hearing that difference for yourself, is just a whole nother story. I mean, the best example I can give is like I had told Chris the weekend after I put this in, I told him, I go, dude, it made my sub. I have a single Alpine Type X, the new Type X 12 in a sealed fiberglass box. And it sounds really good, but as like, it went from sounding like a sealed box to having the output of a vented box. And all I did was introduce a matrix and retune the amps. Like I didn't retune the whole system. I didn't DSP or EQ everything. I literally just turned down the gains and turned up the matrix like a quarter of a turn. And it absolutely rips now. Like what a difference. So the matrix is a very cool little piece. You know, with this guy too, this is another one of those where if you need something to, like I mentioned, bring in 2 channels, but get 6 channels out, this is your piece. If you need something to bring in all 3 front, rear, and sub and do front, rear, and sub and just pass them through and up the voltage, this is a great piece to do that. Now, one of my favorite uses for this though is you can plug in an ACR1 level control bass knob, let's call it, or dash control knob, remote level control. You can plug that into a matrix. When you plug that into the matrix, you can decide with the jumpers inside of here whether you want that to be master volume and control the outputs of all 6, or whether you want that to be just controlling sub or channel 3 output. So if you've got a system that has an aftermarket head unit and okay, great, you are feeding in front, rear, and sub, but your amp doesn't have a bass knob, this is a great, easy way to add one. It's also awesome though for my tablet guys. If you guys are taking out head units and putting an iPad, you're flushing them in, you're doing them the Soundman way, right? Doug at Soundman actually suggests the matrix and sells it with his systems all the time. But if you're doing an iPad as your head unit or an Android tablet as your head unit, this is like the ultimate piece to put behind there, because you can take in, you know, an RCA to speaker level, or excuse me, RCA to headphone jack cable, plug it into an iPad, plug an ACR1 in here and run it as a master volume. And now they've got a physical volume knob. Nobody wants to try to click the buttons on the side of an iPad to try to run the volume. This is a great way to do it without having to hide a head unit somewhere in that install. And that's what a lot of iPad guys are doing, is they're just hiding a single DIN somewhere in there to run volume and have RCA outs and all that stuff. But you don't have to. I mean, this fits in the dash easier than a single DIN. This will give you higher output voltage than any single or double DIN for that matter. And it's just a really cool, clean, easy piece. And if you are doing bigger jobs where there's longer runs of cable, this is an awesome piece to be able to line drive that cable. If you have to run 50 or 100 foot of RCA for whatever reason, this is a great way to up that line voltage and kind of compensate for the loss that you're going to have over a cable run of that length. For my pro audio guys, for my SPL guys, for my Cicero guys that just want volume, they just need to run, you know, 8 amplifiers or 12 amplifiers that are all going to play the same signal essentially. This is a great piece to be able to do it. No Y adapters. We're not splitting a bunch of stuff, you know, and having our voltage over and over again and ending up with no voltage. You can run in full range into one set of inputs, get full range out of all of these outputs if that's what you want, and be able to feed that to a bunch of 4-channel amps or whatever it is that you're doing, and have a single knob that runs the volume for that entire system without ever having a head unit, if that's what you want to do. We also have that ACX BT1, that little Bluetooth adapter that we offer. I don't have one sitting here on the table, but if you take a Bluetooth adapter with RCA out and feed that into this, again, now you've got master volume. You have an awesome way to do a head unit-less system, and you're sprinkling on that special sauce and making that sound way better than it would if you were to just go straight into the amplifier.
Here's a question from Ryan. From an iPad dash, would putting an AudioQuest Dragonfly DAC in before the matrix add more for that true high-res lossless sound, or redundant?
I think you get a cleaner output out of it.
Yeah, I mean,
Yeah.
you know, it's
It's not
just
a
a
bad
matter.
idea.
Yeah, I think I would do it. It's funny because there are a lot of, we actually sell a lot of LC2Is and matrices and stuff like that in home audio setups too, where they're trying to get a little bit more behind their setup. So I would absolutely recommend it.
Yeah,
for that.
I think
kind
that
of
Dragonfly DAC into a matrix, out of a matrix to the rest of that system, I think, Ryan, I don't think you can go wrong. I think that would be fantastic. I mean, it's only going to be better. I mean,
Yeah.
no reason it wouldn't be redundant in my mind. So briefly, because we will be getting to the end here pretty quick, I did want to chat about the 3.2 just for a few moments. Again, it's one of those pieces that I think gets kind of glossed over or forgotten about, and there are guys watching this right now who are like, who uses a half DIN EQ anymore? Like, who still wants one of those? Who's using that? Who's buying these? You'd be surprised if you're not offering these to your customers, if you're not even displaying them or bringing up that they exist. I think you're making a mistake. There's a lot of good reasons to be able to still use these, and there's a lot of customers that don't want a bunch of digital controls and menus and buttons and knobs and displays. There are still lots of guys that just want physical dials and knobs. Again, if you're working on a vehicle that already has a system and you need to sprinkle on the special sauce, if it's got a single DIN with a DIN and a half or double DIN cut out in the dash, take that pocket out and put in a 3.2. Give them some control, give them some simple knobs that they can turn while driving and not be distracted trying to go through a bunch of menus. Again, we're also going to up our line voltage because this is a line driver. We've also got, if you need to bring in one set of RCAs but get all 6 out, that's exactly what you can do with this. One of the other cool things is the 3.2 has been updated to where we have exposed the controls on the top. So there's really no more need to pull the top cover off and move a bunch of jumpers just to do some basic crossover adjustments and voltage adjustments and things like that, or gain adjustments, I should say. So we've made some updates to that. We did also conformally coat the 3.2 as well. So any of you that are looking at getting one of those in the near future, the 3.2 that you get will be conformally coated most likely and have those exposed switches on the top, just making it a little bit more rugged. It's not technically a marine piece, but we do have a lot of dealers that use these in boats, and there's a lot of guys that just don't want a head unit. I mean, who needs a radio out on the water for the most part? This can absolutely be their head unit. This has volume, it's got fader, it's got sub control, it's got a basic EQ. That's really all most guys need. Pair this with a Bluetooth chip, and you're good to go. Put our ACX BT1 on the back side of this. You've got a standalone Bluetooth driven Bluetooth audio head unit, essentially, with basic controls. And every time you park that boat for the winter, when you grab it in the summer, all the controls are going to be right where you left them. There's no worry about everything defaulting back to factory or anything like that. Classic cars is another example of where that 3.2 really kind of shines and is a great piece to use. The Epicenter is the other piece I wanted to talk briefly about, just because we can't talk about sprinkling on the special sauce without talking about the Epicenter. If you, again, have never played with one or heard an Epicenter, like, what a fun piece to have in a system. If you are an absolute SQ purist and want to hear every recording exactly as it was recorded, then no, the Epicenter is probably not for you. But if you're like the 98% of us out there who want to enjoy audio in a vehicle, turn it up fairly loud when the windows are down and it's a nice summer day and you're cruising on the highway or whatever, the Epicenter is perfect. It makes everything just so much more fun to listen to. I've been actually testing a new model in my own car the last couple of days, and just a 16th of a turn of that knob, and whatever it is that I'm listening to just becomes so much more enjoyable. You can make Frank Sinatra have bass. You can make 80s classic rock have bass. You can make a modern hip hop song that already has bass have crazy amounts of bass. Like, whatever it is that you're looking for, the Epicenter is a super fun piece to have in there. So if you've never used one or tried one, I certainly recommend giving that a shot. We offer it in a few different variations. The concert series is your classic kind of trunk mount Epicenter. And then we also offer it in the in-dash variation, which is a half-DIN chassis.
Somebody was asking about when we were going to do the anniversary edition Matrix, and I think what he's asking about is the anniversary edition Epicenter.
And
but
it is actually coming up right here.
Oh my gosh,
look at that. Yes,
yeah,
we are doing a limited edition Epicenter. Late this summer, here in the next month or two, you will see these roll out. They're a 5,000 piece limited quantity run. once they're gone, they're gone. We are not planning to make more of them. They are super, super cool. It's a black on black, laser etched, brushed aluminum top plate. It's not the traditional kind of powder coated black like we normally do. These definitely have a special look and feel and touch to them. All the LEDs have been swapped for blue, so there's no amber and red on there like there normally is. We've got spike on there, which is super important. Got to have spike, and the 1 million strong logo. And that's really what this is to commemorate. Is some of you may have already heard us talk about this in previous trainings or at a trade show or whatever, but we will produce the 1,000,000th Epicenter this summer. Probably actually within the next couple of weeks or so, we will hit the 1 millionth Epicenter to roll off the assembly line, which is a pretty big occasion. I mean, that's huge. So to think that we've made 1 million of these things is just mind blowing. So this is really to kind of commemorate that 1 millionth Epicenter being sold and just kind of celebrate the legacy of such a cool, unique product.
Yeah, it's super exciting to have this piece coming out. It's funny how many people want a specific serial number, you know. Oh, I had my first Epicenter in, 1992. Can I get serial number 1992? And it's really cool. So hopefully in the next couple weeks we're gonna make that number. It's parts even for 38-year-old product are sometimes hard to come by. We would have probably already made the 1 millionth one probably sometime this week. But we're just getting caught up on the open orders of those. So if you guys have been waiting for some Epicenters, they're heading back into the marketplace right now. We're putting out about 600 to 800 of them a day right now. So
yeah, I was gonna say, every time I walk through the factory, I mean, I see lines of people just building Epicenters and trying to get them out there as quickly as they can. So I mean, we are producing them and getting them out. It's just not as quickly as the market would like us to. So we're trying, and we are getting them out there, pretty quick. It's not months and months and months or anything like that. But
one of the things that Matthew had talked about the Epicenter and just the Epicenter effect and how important it's been to the 1 million people out there that have bought one before. The Epicenter is to me, like, I do prefer to be a little bit more of a sound quality guy, but I do like to play it loud. But darn it all, when I want to listen to some classic stuff that doesn't have bass, the Epicenter is the ultimate bass toy, is what I would say. I think of it as not a tool so much, but the awesome Epicenter toy, because
it's a toy for sure. That's a good way to put it.
Yeah, I mean, because it's something that you play with. It's it's not something you set it and just forget about it. No, you play with it. Like, if you're listening to something, if you just get done, say however you stream, if you're listening to like some crazy mix of stream content, and you go from one song that has bass, and then an old school jam comes on that doesn't have bass, and having that Epicenter knob is the best thing in the world, because that next song after a bass heavy song is going to sound anemic. It's going to sound like, it sounds good, but man, what I wouldn't do to get a little bit of something kicking me in my chest bass, right? Just like you say, just quarter knob turn of the Epicenter effect, and boom, there it is,
And I mean, some songs, it's even like just a hair, like a 16th of a turn, even some songs is enough to enhance them. I mean, you don't want to make it sound silly, but you want it to just be better. And it is wild what a difference that thing makes.
Yeah. And I mean, it's funny, like how many purists will boo-hoo it, but let's be honest, what else out there has been made in the millions, right? If we were making a 1 millionth one in the next 30 days for sure, how bad can it be? And the reality is that
come talk to me when you've moved 1 million DSPs.
Yeah, most people who have had an Epicenter, if they have an aftermarket stereo, they have an Epicenter.
They'll have one again.
Oh, for sure. It's hard for me because, like, like I don't play with mine very much, but when I
Hmm.
do, I want it there. It might only be one out of every 25 songs that I'll sit there and go,
Sure.
oh, wait, I want a little something. But when
Yeah.
I want it, I want it. You know what I'm
Yeah.
saying? And
Absolutely.
that's where the epicenter comes in. Now there are certainly, the majority of the marketplace that has epicenters use it all the time because they're listening to the same content all the time that doesn't
Mhm.
have, the lower frequency bass response. And
Yeah.
so yeah, absolutely. I mean, it goes from being a necessity, but for so many of us, it's a toy. If you want to
Yeah.
have a toy where you can play with bass, the epicenter is it. And I think you should have an epicenter limited edition.
Yeah, it's a fun accessory for sure. And it's one of those things where I think, the like common stereotype is like, oh well, epicenters are used for two things: Hispanic music and classic rock. Like that's what people think of. And yes, those are viable reasons to use it, and those are great reasons to use it. But like I mentioned before, even with a modern song, pop, hip hop, EDM, whatever, that has a lot of bass already, it doesn't necessarily mean that that song has the low bass that you're hoping it has. I mean, I've definitely heard songs on headphones before where I go, oh, I can't wait to hear this in my car. And then I listen to it in my car and I'm like, is that it? This is kind of disappointing. Like on your headphones, it sounded great. And then you get it in the car and you're like, oh, there is no low bass. It was just punchy upper bass. Well, that epicenter really does add in that low bass that's missing from so many songs, not just Latin or Hispanic music and classic rock. The other thing that it's great for that I'll mention before we move on and wrap things up is different systems. I mean, we're starting to see cars out there that just don't have any info below a certain point. Some of the Hondas don't have any information below about 70 hertz. There's just nothing there. They're permanently high passed. It's not at a certain volume. It's not at certain sources or, anything to do with ANC or any of that stuff. It is all the time, every source, every volume point, whatever. There's really nothing below 70. What are you going to do with that? Like, there's
Yep.
no fix for that car other than adding an epicenter into that car. The other thing that it's great for is if you have a customer or you yourself are a satellite radio enthusiast. Satellite radio is great. Sirius XM is awesome. However, it is lacking some things, and one of those things is low bass. To get all those channels and content to fit in the bandwidth that they have on satellite, they had to make some concessions, and one of those concessions they made was ditching some of the really low bass out of the signals. Well, the epicenter can help to put that back. So if you do have one of those customers who's that diehard satellite radio guy, has you add Sirius XM to every one of his vehicles or whatever, it's a great piece to be able to make satellite sound even better. On the topic of adding it to vehicles and things like that, I did want to mention one other piece before we wrap up. And that's something Chris and I are super excited for. This is actually what I've been testing in my car this last weekend, and that is the Epicenter Micro. So the Micro is a super exciting piece. Physically speaking, this thing is about the size of an LC2i Pro. It's actually even a little bit smaller. So if we look at something like this, it is physically a little bit smaller actually than the 2i Pro. So that thing is truly micro. It is tiny. One of the other things that you might notice looking at the image on your screen right now is that it has high level inputs. So if you are doing one of these newer cars, Land Rover, Jaguar, Range Rover, newer Honda, whatever car it is that just doesn't have any low frequency info below 60, 70, 80 hertz, now you don't have to add, or you won't have to very soon, you won't have to add an LC2i or LC1i plus an epicenter. You'll be able to just put in an Epicenter Micro and it'll act as your LOC and as your epicenter all in one piece. So what you're basically going to have is as a retailer, what I would be looking at is LC2i Pros and Epicenter Micros as my go-to LOCs. And I would consider the Epicenter Micro like an advanced LOC almost, because if I have that car coming in and I bust out my DMRTA and do 2 minutes worth of testing and find out that, hey, this is one of those cars, Epicenter Micro is going to be my go-to solution because it's going to be the only thing that really makes that car sound good. No other solution is really going to fix that car, short of putting in multiple products. If it's any other vehicle where it just has bass roll off, then an LC2i Pro is going to be an awesome solution for those ones. But a couple of details on this before we wrap things up for today. This has, obviously, like I mentioned, the high level input. It has low level in as well. So this is a standalone Epicenter. But some of the features I'm really excited for, one of those is it is conformally coded. So for my power sports and marine guys out there that have been beating me up at every knowledge fest and every SEMA show going, hey, where's my Epicenter for side-by-sides? Where's my Epicenter for motorcycles? Where's my Epicenter for boats? Well, here you go. This is going to be it. The other thing that I'm excited about is the Defeatable Pfm. I'm just glad to not have to hear about it anymore. You know, you have customers out there that want to play 10 hertz or whatever through their system. All right, man, go ahead and turn off the PFM and just, you know, have at it. Yeah, you want to launch those woofers, you be my guest. And then, you know, one of their cool things is this has all your LMC circuitry in there. So this essentially has all 3 LGDs built inside. But one of the most exciting things, I think, is the ACR4. The ACR4 is the new knob that will come with the Epicenter Micro, and it's a dual concentric knob. So gone will be the days of having to put in an Epicenter knob and your amplifier's bass knob and having 2 separate controls. Now you'll have one, and the outer ring can do Epicenter control, and the inner ring will do overall sub volume. So you'll put in one knob, not have to mess with it, and away you go. So I can't tell you how excited I am for that piece. Like I said, I've been testing it in my own car this last weekend. It sounds fantastic. It works really, really well. It's got our new turn on modes built in there as well for easy integration. Like, such a cool piece. I'll let Chris say a few words about that, and then we'll wrap things up.
I mean, the Epicenter Micro to me is the epitome of how AudioControl takes technology and stuff and modernizes it and makes it you know, puts the special sauce on it yet again. Agreed. You know, the ideal is that when we make products, we're making products for 15, 20 years. You know, if we're fortunate enough to come out with a technology or something like the Epicenter that really stands the test of time at, you know, darn near 40 years old, you know, don't you want the absolute best of that technology? So, you know, the Epicenter Micro is something that we've been working on for a while and trying to make sure that whatever features we put on there are the features that you guys, our customers, are going to want for the next 15, 20 years. And everything is there. This new knob is fantastic. We can't wait to incorporate it into other products and really use that as a simplified way for you to interact and have that control. We have a bunch of, there's actually quite a few questions. So the Epicenter Micro is really super cool, something we're looking forward to. First question, what's the difference between the Epicenter and having Accubase? Great question. It's something that we touch on almost every time we talk about AudioControl. The difference is the Epicenter creates bass below whatever bass is in the system that you're listening to, where Accubase takes the bass that's there and allows you to have up to 15 decibels of boost in that bass frequency that's already there. So one creates bass at a lower octave, one increases bass when it starts to roll away. So
yeah, the way that I like to try to explain that a little bit, just to elaborate on what Chris said, is the Epicenter puts bass back that was never there, or it introduces bass that was never there in the first place, either because of the type of car you have or the music you listen to or the way the song was recorded or whatever. The Accubase circuitry puts bass back that was taken away by a factory processor or head unit. That's the easiest way for me to describe it.
That's perfect. And then will the ACR4 work on the DM810? Not at this time. It will actually work, but it won't do any features or functions. So, you know, it won't work because that's an encoder.
The DM products need a rotary.
It will
encoder.
not work.
Yeah.
So no, it will not. But it is something that we're looking at. Before we go through and make major changes on the DMs, there might be another processor in the works. I will say that. And then we have a Hear Me Out DEQ with Bluetooth Epicenter module, 4XS out, the matrix line driver, fully controllable with an app. and you can store different presets and select them from an app. So that's a product ideal, and that's a great product ideal. I did mention that we might be looking at doing another DSP, and I think all those bases would be touched and then some.
Yep.
Maybe by like 3 times more stuff.
Yep.
But and then Aubrey, what's happening, Aubrey? Apologies, a little off topic. When can we expect the MRTAs to be available again? Yes, that's a great question. It looks like right now we should next week start shipping those the DMRTA Pro kits out again. We've had DMRTAs available, but we have not had the Pro kits or anything like that.
I think so. A shortage of the blue cases or something there for a minute.
Yep. And we actually, we probably wouldn't have ran out of them, but I don't know if you guys heard or not, but most stuff that is traveling back and forth between wherever you're getting product and stuff like that, there's major delays. So we've had those are probably on a 7-week delay at this point from when we should have gotten them, but we just haven't. So it looks like right now they are what you call docked, and so we should start shipping those out again next week. Will the upcoming Epicenter Mini have the same function? The Epicenter Effect is the same, but Correct. The Epicenter Micro adds just a ton more features and benefits for different use case scenarios. So, the fact if you wanted to use the Epicenter Micro with any kind of stereo, whether it's a factory, aftermarket, factory premium sound, just any kind of application at all, the Epicenter Micro is going to be the go-to piece. The fact that it comes with the new ACR is probably the next best selling point, because now you can have full control over anything downstream with both the Epicenter Effect as well as level controls. The fact that all the controls are on the outside makes it really easy. You'll never have to disassemble and do anything. Wide and sweep knobs. So there's just a whole lot of coolness about the Epicenter Micro, where if the Epicenter is just the ultimate bass toy, the Epicenter Micro is the ultimate bass toy with and a tool in my eyes. So something like people have said, another guy said he ran into a problem with a Kia having no bass response out of it here recently. The Epicenter Micro would be my line output converter for any bass model, Hondas, Kias, anything like that. So I would use that over an LC2i, just because if a customer's coming in, it gives them the ability to not only control level, but also control the Epicenter Effect. So
yeah, basically once the Mini comes out, or the Micro, I should say, I mean, if you carried the LC2i Pro and you carried the Epicenter Micro, for doing bass add-ons like bass packages in cars, you'd be pretty much covered for just about anything out there. Like there wouldn't be much you couldn't do. And to kind of elaborate on somebody's question there, like, is it the same? If you wanted to take an Epicenter Micro and literally just use it as a standard Epicenter, as a concert series Epicenter that's just smaller, you absolutely could. Like it'll perform the same as a concert series Epicenter. The Epicenter that you know and love is still built in. Like that part of the circuitry is all still there. It's just got a bunch of other cool features, and it's been obviously shrunk down. So just to kind of reiterate that point a little bit.
And then this one comes up quite frequently. If I'm adding an Epicenter, do I place it before or after my DM608?
Oh yeah, that's a classic question.
You want to answer that one, Matthew?
And he said before or after his what? Sorry.
His DM608.
Yeah. So you have a couple of different ways to go in my mind with that. I mean, I guess it kind of depends on how you're configuring that system and what all is involved in there. If I have a DM608 in there, I'm probably going to go, well, what with the DSP, what do you do, Chris?
I go after.
I was going to say, I would go after if it was me. I don't see any reason to DSP an Epicenter signal, but it's
potato, but it's like potato, like a big russet versus a tiny red in my eyes. So, I would go after. The reason I would go after is I want to do most of my DSP and EQing before going in, and I want to make sure that the Epicenter is getting 500 hertz or more, and then you go from the Epicenter out, and then you use, you're going almost every time you're going from the Epicenter to a bass, mono bass amp or something like that, and you rely on the crossover after the DSP. That is where, that's where you're going to get the most logical and best response from the Epicenter itself. So in my crossover coming out of the DSP, I would play 500 hertz down, go into the Epicenter after the DSP, because you can still do all the time alignment and different things through the Epicenter. So I would put mine after the Epicenter, or after the DM608 for sure.
Yeah. Let's see here. Is there any other? Looks like you covered most of the questions.
Leon said he'd like to see an Epicenter combined with the Richter scale. You know, I have not personally played with the Richter scale on the home side as much. There's so much audio control technology over the last 40 years that we have around the office, and it's hard to really go through and play with stuff, especially when we've been putting out so much new product over the last 5 years. You know, it's you know, truly we're taking the successes and taking the special sauce of audio control and evolving it. And we're doing that on both the home and the car side. And we're trying to poise you guys for having audio success, whether you're a consumer, whether you're a dealer, whether you're a rep. We're just really focused on taking our successes that we have not, you know, we take different look at product, you know, as being a US manufacturing, having our, you know, our 8 in-house engineers just kind of trying to figure out different ways to overcome the audio issues that have existed for, you know, forever. As soon as music started getting recorded, you know, there's stuff that happens in the recording process, you know, that we want to overcome, you know, or we have factory stereos that don't do it for us. We have aftermarket stereos that don't do it for us. You know, when I had my store, at least 3 or 4 times a week, somebody would come in and go, "Hey, I've got this system. You know, I've had it for a year, or I just had it installed and it just doesn't do it for me. It still doesn't do it for me. And I just spent this money. What do I do?" I think AudioControl is that company for you guys. You know, I think AudioControl is that company that, you know, our slogan has been, we make good sound great, because we realize almost 100% of the time that you already have audio going on, but your audio might not be what it should be. And that's AudioControl. That's the secret sauce, guys. We have a lot more products than what we talked about today. We have a lot more products coming. You know, maybe next time we'll talk about some of the simpler things that we're trying to do, whether it's with the ACX Bluetooth lineup, whether it's the ACRU that we have coming up. A lot of cool things that we do. Super proud of our engineering team and just how they continue to somehow find it in them to come out with new product, whether on the home or car side, that is game changing for us as an industry. So
some very cool innovative pieces coming very soon, which is exciting stuff.
So we thank you guys for being here. Matthew is our ringleader for today, so I'll let him take us out. And man, it's good to catch up with you guys. We appreciate you. We appreciate the support. We appreciate what's happened over the last few years at AudioControl. And as long as you guys keep on supporting us, we're going to support you with new and fresh and unique product. So I'll let Matthew take us out.
Thanks, Chris. So yeah, thank you guys for joining us today for the special sauce. I hope it was fun for you guys. I know I had a good time. It's pretty cool just hanging out for an hour, chatting about some cool audio stuff. So we'll try to do these trainings once a month. So hopefully we'll catch you next time. If you have any questions or anything like that, feel free to hit us up on Facebook or follow us on Instagram, that sort of thing. And like Chris mentioned earlier, the majority of these trainings have been recorded, and I do try to get them polished and uploaded to our YouTube channel. In the YouTube channel, there is something called the training library, and it has all of the trainings that we've recorded and uploaded. And we are continuing to upload more as I find time to polish those old recordings and get them uploaded. So if you missed one, or we didn't talk about what you wanted us to talk about today, drop us a message, let us know what you want to talk about or what you want more info on, or have a look through that YouTube channel, see if there's something there that covers what your question was. So with that, thank you guys for your continued support. We really appreciate it, and hopefully we'll see you next time. Have a great day. See ya.
See you guys.